Yeah,
Do you
Ranger.
remember the first time? Do you remember the very first time you went up the stairs at KOPN? Was it even to do anything there?
Boy, that's a good. Well, you go up the stairs to go to Kai Min. you know, uh, that's those are the stairs. I don't remember when I went up there. I don't. It was after I lived in. I was. I know I was living at the Chez Coffeehouse at that time, so it would be somewhere in the mid '70s. There, I'm not sure why I went up there. I might have been going up there. I don't know. Sam Griffin might have taken
Uh,
us up there for grins. There might have been a music thing that I went up there for.
maybe the Irish folks were playing upstairs or something. You never know.
Yeah, it might have just been an open house. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I ever went to those stairs, I remember this distinctly, was we were waiting in line for tickets that the station was selling for the Ozark Mountain Daredevils.
Wow.
It was like one of the very first big concerts, and it was my first awareness that there was even anything up at the top of the stairs.
Huh.
In that regard, Sam
Well,
Griffin hooked you there. Well, he's taken me many places.
I came to Columbia in '73 to go to MU, and in the fall, and KOPN was on the air. I distinctly remember hearing Woody Guthrie and Cisco Houston singing together, and thought, well, man, this is where I got to be because you know folk music was where I was at, and
Well,
so
could you maybe distinct between the folk people? Well, I mean, I would say like there's the folk people, the Irish folks, and then there was the bluegrass mafia that was sort of very very strong at that station, and then of course the Crystal Set feminists. Those were
oh
all
yes, oh yes.
on it. So so in that well living at the Shea, you'd have to be involved there, right?
Well, I think so. That's probably how I got involved because there were so many people there into music, and I heard about, I knew that the station existed, but I might not have known where it was. And then until I was living, a few blocks from it. And so I'm sure that's how I went up there. And I was looking, I still have my third class radio operator's license. And I showed it to somebody and they said, that expired in 1980. I can't read it. Yeah, expired in 1979. So,
79.
yeah. So I don't know.
That's back
I
when the
think I carry it
EBS.
around. I carry it around for another government ID. Um, yeah. So I was doing it. So that means I don't know 77. I was living in the Shea by 70, winter of 75. So maybe the next, I know I went and did a show there. I did your spot, 12 to 3, I think I did, or 12 to 2 or something, or 1 to 3. It was, and I know I was done, and then it was the Women's Moon of Artemis show came on after me, and
And what was that show? What was it? What was that show called that you did? Did you have a name for it?
Across the Wide Missouri.
Oh, Across the Wide Missouri. There you go.
Yeah, I started doing that. I opened up it was always the song was the World of Misery. It's a variant of Shenandoah. We are bound away from this world of misery. Yeah, it's a Caribbean variant of that song. It was on Folk Legacy. It was on the
Uh-huh.
Golden Ring album, one
Yeah.
of the Golden Ring albums. And yeah, I did that
So,
show, and then and I'm sure Sam came up and helped me, help. I don't know. I did a training session. I know that much. And then eventually, Joe Newberry was my roommate, and then Joe and I did the show together. And then I guess I got too busy, and then Joe did it after me.
Papa Joe Newberry, who, of cross both lines there on things. So, am I right in the fact that the Radio Rangers, the tune, was that you and Papa Joe who did that? We're the Radio Rangers. We're the Radio
That
Rangers.
must be Joe.
Must be Joe.
I never recorded. The only thing we recorded together for a while that they used to play in pledge drives was "Send Your Bucks to KOPN's Door." It was a version of "Make Me Down a
Send your bucks to
$1,000."
KOPN's door.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
You don't send no cash in. We're gonna sell the station to Time In. Yeah, yeah, that was fun. And that was, I think, I don't know, I think we just did that during a pledge drive. Showing me. Yeah.
Well, the thing I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about was I think was the effect on the folk community of KOPN being there. When you got there, you were already into folk music to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And so the resource that it's provided was huge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my classic story is Cathy's classic story was my late wife, Cathy Barton, my dear late wife, Cathy Barton. Cathy was already playing old time tunes on the banjo. I think she had already connected with some local fiddlers like Taylor McBain, Charlie Walden. And she heard Bill Spence's album, The Hammer Dulcimer, playing tunes that she certainly, if she didn't know, she certainly recognized the form, and called the station and said, "What is that?" you know, and they were, I guess Tom told her, "This is the Hammer Dulcimer album by Bill Spence," and Cathy went and got the album and played it over and over, and then told her father, Claude, "Daddy, I want one of these instruments," which he had no idea where to buy. I mean, you couldn't buy one in Columbia. And in fact, I was just telling my new father-in-law, Peter Garrity, that in those days, I don't think there was any real maker of hammer dulcimers. Every player I can think of at that time had made their own instrument. The instrument on Bill Spence's album was the one he made himself. So Claude just said, "Well, I think I can make one of these," and then made her first 3 dulcimers. And I mean, yeah, it had an impact on the community. Cathy was the first hammer dulcimer player to play on stage at Winfield for thousands of people. And it really bolstered her and therefore our career. But also, it was also a place, there were all kinds of live music that went up there. And I can't remember the number of times, I went up there for some live thing, something we did or something we watched, or, it was and I mean, where else are you going to hear it? That's before Prairie Home Companion and any of those shows on NPR. I think Bill Rogers did a show of folk music on KBIA once himself, but I think that was before my time. So it's where it was, it's where it still is.
Yeah, and it's still that genre is not it's not like it's old. It's still new folk music being made today that gets played on KOP, sure, along with things that are I would call traditional standards of folk music, but that whole aspect, the commingling of songs and how people do that. I think KOPN's are pretty much that gumbo stew of commingling of musical influences that are just that the ripple effects of music as it goes out, whether it's on the radio and Cathy hears it and then decides that she needs a hammer dulcimer, or somebody else hears it and says, "Hey, whatever that is, I want more of it.
Yeah,
I want to learn about it," is one of its greatest powers. I know Lee and I have talked about this a couple times, how Deke Dickerson, who came up there young, maybe he might have been 12. He could have been 13. I don't think he was much older. And went and sat in front of the rockabilly section of vinyl that KOPN had. And Lee said, it wasn't really like he was like a kid who came in there and was like learning this stuff. It was like he'd been there, like he already knew all this stuff, and it was like validation for him.
Hmm.
And as we know, Deke's been validating that for a long time, musically.
Well, and it's also where local folk people got played. And that when you, as a listener, then you actually can make comparisons of, oh, this is a local guy and that's a nationally known person, and you get them all pushed together and there's a greater validation of it. Validation is the word, I guess, but it just becomes, draws the larger community into the smaller community, or vice versa. I don't know, but it's just folk music wasn't something that you could hear a lot of. I was right out of high school, came to Missouri when I was discovering FM radio in Chicago, and even there, list wanting hearing the music I wanted to hear on the radio wasn't. You were still limited. Um, there was a there was one AM station that was kind of alternative and went off the air. I forget, but it's Crystal Lakes, Illinois, or something. But then there were other stations, but not that many. I can't remember now what they were. But I mean, WFMT was a classical music station largely, and wonderful because the people on air read the ads. They didn't have recorded ads, which was really, I don't know. There's something nice about a voice coming to you live over a radio. That's it's one of the things I love about your show, Ranger, is that there's this voice. I have this sense of immediacy. I have this sense of connection with you. So, but anyway, WFMT would mix classical and folk music. Those Their programmers were real astute, and so you could hear some stuff. But anyway, so FM was my life. When I came to Missouri, and God, there was the station in out of the dorms, that MU out of that station was there, but that was basically it.
Well, I think when I first came and started working and doing stuff at KOPN, I was doing Boone County Live. I kind of took that over as a show on Sunday evenings, which was a live music show, mostly at the radio station. People would come up and we'd set up, and there was mostly blues and rock and other things at times that was there. And I learned a lot about mixing music and how music you can make it sound good and bad
Oh
from
yeah,
that. From
yeah.
that, but really, um, just in that process of it, and uh, and then I did then I started doing other radio shows. I mean, at that point in time, I was just doing that, and then I started doing a midnight radio reggae show. Um,
Right, yeah.
before I inherited Rootin' Tootin' Radio from Debbie Lou Jewett, um, who had the show, and then we went to work at the library and couldn't do that show, and then I picked up on it as a daytime show for Rootin'
Uh,
Tootin' Radio,
when
which
was
was
that? That's not Sunday
that was
afternoon.
about 85 maybe.
What is that, Sunday afternoon?
No, it was like on like Wednesdays or something like
Oh,
that.
okay.
It was in the
Okay.
middle of the week, but it was in the daytime. It was like
Yeah.
10 to 12 or something like I don't remember it, but it was in the week, during the week. And then eventually later on it moved to Sundays, and then so it's been there ever since. But
Oh,
um yeah, I think when you were talking about the human voice is probably I try to get when people are doing radio or want to come do radio, I always try to explain to them that really the parts about the show, like the music, anybody can do the music, really. I mean, everybody does their own Spotify and their whatever, they their own playlist or whatever. And so you can, and most people, but the things that you can't get there, or the human parts of it, I've always been really felt that the parts of the show on Root and Tootin' Radio anyway are the tree time, the critter de jour, uh,
Hmm.
those things are really like the tent poles of the actual show for me. And then music is just sort of the transportation that and commentary between.
Uh,
I like to look at it that way.
I
Uh,
Yeah, I was always focused on the music, and I didn't generally, I generally didn't plan a playlist before I got there. I might have had some ideas or had some things that I wanted to play, yeah, and then I was real big about mentioning who played what, and that kind of information.
yeah, well, particularly for people who are listening that want that, they want to know
Yeah.
who it
See
was.
you tomorrow.
I always kind of do the three thing, the three,
The
one.
original spectrum, the original spectrum of Jewish music guy, Aaron Rabushka,
Um,
that guy. He was a good.
Kevin Walsh.
Let's see.
Oh, I'm hearing audio.
Still around, spinning
Yeah.
world.
Hello? I was hearing audio about Aaron Babushka
Oh.
there.
Yes, sorry. Kevin is here.
Hey, Dave.
Kevin Walsh is here.
All right.
Hey,
Oh, no.
what's up, man?
That's not Mr. Mercurial.
Good to see
That's
your
my
face,
name for him.
Kara. How you doing, Dave?
Kevin.
And Steve, you okay up there?
I'm okay, it's I'm waiting for warm weather for my garden mostly.
Yeah, you're
Well-
into the gardening, I know. Yeah, I need you out of my place. Dave, what are you doing in down in the Southwest? Are you there permanently?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I still have the house. We still have the house in Boonville. I'm going to keep it. Meredith Ludwig's living there.
Oh, perfect.
And that's fine. Somebody's in there. We get there every, I don't know, a couple of months for a while. Over COVID, it was hard to,
Dave,
I don't know.
don't
It's all
apologize. I can tell just it's written all over your face. You're a happy man, and I'm glad for you. I was just saying it.
I got,
But good.
on my birthday, I was talking to my sister, and I mentioned that, Erica's grandchildren, I'm father of none, grandfather of two.
Uh-huh.
How they eventually all, despite the vaccines, they all, the kids came home with COVID, in February.
Oh,
And they all got it. And then at Christmas, and then we were heading toward Missouri with our dog, because we have a dog now as of Boxing Day.
congratulations.
My sister says to me, she says, David, and she's my older sister,
Uh-huh.
you have a dog and you have grandchildren. This is not the brother I have known. So yeah, life is a little different. And
I like it.
Erica's a lovely.
Oh, I
this is
bet.
a
You
little bit of
do not
love.
do not apologize or explain. I know I am glad and happy for you. It's great. I mean, it's act 2 or whatever. It has to change.
Could very well be. Yes.
Hey, I got to get on the air. I'm following. Hey, Dave, hey, Steve, do you remember Aaron Rabushka?
I do remember Aaron Babushka.
Remember him, Dave?
No.
Spectrum of Jewish.
Spectrum of
Music.
Jewish music. Yeah.
And he was in the Opus Guide. He actually wrote a piece of music that got put in the Opus Guide. So anyway, we're reminiscing. I'll let you guys get back to it. You look good, Para. Steve, I'll see you soon.
Yes.
All right. See you, Kevin.
Later, man.
Well, that's a
That's
nice.
what happens. That's what happens when you forget to mute yourself and Kevin Walsh walks in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It could have been Frank Fillo.
could have been. Yeah, see, it's half of the other comedy troupe there.
I'm trying, but I can only interview people who will respond to my messages, and he is not.
Maybe we'll reach out and tickle Frank, see if he can. We have some ways we can tickle him on things. I don't remember where we were, but I think it was something about we were talking about announcing and back announcing music for people and why it's important. I I always thought that I would like to use the factor of three. You know, if you forward announce one and you back announce two, and you only play three tunes, most people can figure that out. And if you're driving in Columbia at that point in time, it was like 10 minutes to go anywhere. Well, now you got like 20 minutes to go anywhere because it's bigger and there's more traffic. But
I never did that. I always thought, I mean, there was occasionally some things written on the wall. Be sure to announce this.
oh,
And,
that.
and I don't think there was really a cart machine. Maybe there was a cart machine, but maybe not when I started. But and so I didn't do a whole lot of forward programming, and I just figured people were sitting listening to the radio, doing other stuff, and not necessarily in the car. That's how I listened to KOPN. Well, I listened to it all the way. Still.
Yeah. So is there, when you're looking at let's just say, talk about Big Muddy Folk Festival for a second.
Uh-huh.
Most of the artists who have come there over going on 30 years now, something.
It'll be the 30th.
Have been introduced mostly either through KOPN or that festival to Mid Missouri, and there's been a large kind of I would say that it's been a place where those artists get respect that maybe they don't get other places. A lot like how True False respects the documentary thing. Big Muddy respects the folk artists. I think that's probably a good way of looking at it from my point.
Yeah, and when we started the Big Muddy Folk Festival, the idea that one of the first places we're going to go and talk about it is KOPN. I mean, it's just kind of in the center of our consciousness about this. I mean, it was. Let's see. KOPN brought Hartford to Boonville, to Thespian Hall, and I think that was a KOPN concert.
It was a KOPN. I remember working the stage with it. Yeah.
And Bob and Cathy and I and what's her name? Played fiddle. Played with us, and Forrest played with us. It was kind of like
Amy. Amy, was it Amy from the Mudbugs? That time, or was it earlier? No, Annie Rue probably.
Annie Rue. Annie Rue came, and it was basically, we were there. I think he asked Bob, and then I think we were all basically backing Bob up. But I think that was, that was one of the first concerts where there was a whole bunch of bluegrass people in the theater. And my understanding is, Thespian Hall was purchased for the Friends of Historic Boonville. I mean, the Friends of Historic Boonville started in the 70s in the effort to save Thespian Hall from being torn down as the Lyric Theater as it had become. And so it was purchased by Crosby Kemper of United Missouri Bankshares. And my understanding is that Crosby told people, said, I don't ever want to see a guitar played on the stage. I mean, he was a very classically oriented guy, and that was his taste in music, and that was his money. And I'm told that when they got Carlos Montoya, the world-renowned flamenco guitarist, they had to go to him and say, look, Crosby, this is a different kind of thing here. They had to, so, then, fast forward some years, and then here's this, this hall full of people, upstairs, downstairs, to see Hartford, because he could draw from 150 miles, and I mean, the place is packed and the people are going. Well, if you own a hall like that, you like to see it filled with people, and by God, it was full of people. And I believe, in my mind, I don't remember, it was in the 80s when that happened, but when Cathy and I went to Judy Shields and said, we want to do a folk festival here, already in her brain, yeah, that was good. I think it just laid that groundwork. And the hall was great, and I, loved the hall. So. Hello, doggy. Was that a dog? Your dog?
Yeah, I don't know. I remember him saying for miking of him, we have head, hands, and feet. Basically, that's all. Head, hands, and feet. He wants a mic for his, mic for singing, and maybe a harmonica, and then hands for picking and playing and other things, and feet for
Yeah, they
playing
had a pickup on a sheet
on a
of
board.
plywood.
Yeah, on plywood. Yeah. No, that was great. It was. Well, I'm glad to know that everything that happens was added to that for people to see. The
I mean,
I'm glad.
one of the things I used to love about KOPN is the fact, and I know people who have radio stations or media things hate this, but you're not going to, I always figured, well, I'm not going to like everything I hear on KOPN, but you never know. At least I have a chance of hearing it. And, I remember my father-in-law, Claude, the retired Army colonel, would listen to folk music there in the afternoon. And at 3 o'clock, then the Moon of Artemis comes on. And one afternoon, he's sitting up there reading the Sunday paper, on his couch. And then during this show, there's some recitations of erotic lesbian poetry. And Claude was a pretty taciturn guy, and I just watched him. He looked over and click, turned it off. That was done. But, that was the things that you could get out of KOP, and things you're not going to get, because you're not going to get it because it's the community wants to do it, and they're not trying to sell ads. And, it wasn't an ad space. And so much of media, it's an ad space. And you got to, I don't know, not saying that ads are necessarily bad, but you know what I mean. You know what AM radio was like in the 70s.
Yeah, well, NASCAR of sort of, in audio form, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Minus the cars going around for sure.
But I also remember there was what was it? I think it was One Truth, Many Paths. I think that was the show. And there were some guys, and I probably know who these people are now, but I don't remember who they were then. They had been on a fast for like, I don't know, 10 days or something. They fasted for 10 days. And they were on the air on the day they were coming off their fast. And they were talking about each thing they were going to eat right now. And, and I'm thinking, well, this is kind of interesting. And, but, is it interesting to everybody? Well, probably not, but here I am, and Sufi music, it's you could hear it and judge or decide whether or not you want to hear it.
Yeah, no, it opens lots of doors and windows for people to think and differently, hear differently, even understand. I mean, if you think about it, in the mid early '80s, most people didn't even know what reggae was. Didn't have an idea that it existed. Very specialized places maybe so, but not. But in here in Middle Columbia, yeah, you did because you got to hear it on a radio station, and so there's that exposing people. Can you open into the exposure client? What's that?
There you go. Well, the other thing is, and I've said this before.
There you go.
Told this to
Red,
you.
green, and gold. There you go.
I've told you this, that when you get somebody doing a show of the music they love, you get the music and you get the love, and those come across. And I just think that's just so important. And yeah, so can be a little amateurish, but bless their hearts, it's who we are.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I mentioned them earlier, but one of the stronger kind of, and the person who holds the fort for that right now, and for many years, has been Carol Goodnick with the Irish
Yeah.
Players, who are a strong contingent for a long time. They're the Baker sisters, Teresa Baker and Mary Baker. I mean, I told this, my first experience of actually cutting audio tape with a razor blade was Mary Baker gave me this reel of, I think it was Swoop or something, and said, "Here, go through here and cut out all the dead spots of nothing happening." And he's like, "Really? Okay." I think I can make the cuts and tape it back together for you, but
Oh.
it was that was and that was I mean I had been around mixing music, but I had not really been around cutting tape. That was kind of a radio thing, editing that way. We
Yeah.
were more likely at that time to actually record it and then you figure out a way to get to it later, because we didn't always have half-track machines to record to,
Right.
on stuff. But I had mentioned Boone County Live, and that's really where I got out into the community, and I got to go over to a place no longer exists called Lee's Lounge at the corner of Garth and Ash, and
Huh.
and that's where some of my earliest recordings of Chump Change were there, and really getting the
That wasn't in that bank building, was it?
no, it was right on the corner. There's like a women's center there. It's on the if you were it's on the same it would be on the west corner, on the
Okay.
southwest corner of Garth and Ash, and it was that place at one time called Yay Soul, and then it became Lee's Lounge. And Sunday night he had music, and I was like, well, I can just take the board and the Marty, our mobile unit, and go out and mix and with these guys and send it back to the station. And which was the odd thing, because if you do that, people will say, well, I'll just stay home and listen. But it
Yeah.
was kind of a happening world, so to be in the happening world, you had to be there, on it. So that was always a fun thing for me, was remotes. And I think that's why Sam and I for years, the KOPN remote vehicle was mine and Sam's Datsun B210.
Oh
And
yeah.
we could load more gear into Datsun B210s than you could even imagine. Come out. It was always like a clown show.
Yeah.
Can you?
Stop the clown.
They're still
Yeah.
bringing stuff out of there.
Yeah. I think there was briefly a moment when I think Cathy went up and did a show once. It was maybe it was one of the slots that Sam was doing at the time, and she went up, and I remember she cued an album on the air, which is no good, and then there was one point where they started the record. She started the record, and it was on 45 speed or something. I think it was just going really fast. And Cathy kind of froze, and Sam went in and boink, hit the 33, and then well, moments that you look for in local media. But yeah, those I don't know. It's an adventure. And I might find myself back on the radio here in Albuquerque.
Oh, really?
There's the KUNM, the University of New Mexico.
New Mexico. Uh-huh.
They have a folk roots show, ROUTES. So you can go both ways with it, I guess.
Uh-huh.
It's been suggested by my lovely wife that because I always have comments. You're always commenting about what you're hearing on the radio, aren't you? But anyway, I might find myself doing that. They have a group of hosts for that show, and they would like to have more, so they have a little wider rotation. But they haven't started any training sessions yet. Who knows? But hell, I don't know. I mean, you have all these streaming services. I mean, there's KOPN having this big discussion about what they're going to do with all their LPs, if they're going to, that kind of stuff. And I mean, that's all I ever queued. I think there was some I don't know. I wasn't doing it in the 90s, so I'm not sure. But we'll see. I don't know anything about digital libraries or.
Well, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to queue files sometimes if you can find them and they're not corrupted. And CDs I thought was a wonderful thing. I still use mostly CDs because I grew up with queuing records and there was always the next record that had to be queued.
Right.
There was always that. Like if I was to put a playlist together and just put it up there, and it's like, well, what am I doing now? I don't know what I'm supposed to do next because the next song is going to play versus me queuing it. And I might change my mind. I might be listening to that song and I was going to play this song off of this disc, but I think I'm going to play this song off of the disc. And I like that part of the Air world in that it's not scripted, but it should flow. It has some kind of internal flow in my brain. And good God, I don't know if that means anything to anybody else, but at least it makes my brain happy.
I remember doing a segment once where I decided I'm going to do a whole segment, at least a half an hour of tunes that were under 2 minutes long. Because I knew a bunch, and I said, I just threw them up there,
That's a lot of queuing.
Yeah, it was a lot of queuing, but and a little more planning than I was used to. But, those were fun. And I'd get people call every now and then. You get people call me up and say, "Well, I really like the music you're playing today." That was pretty nice. I didn't, so.
It's odd when I've met people most of the time out at, places, and I tell them, well, that's the show, and they say, well, they'll not recognize my voice maybe, and I'll say, you're the radio ranger, and I'll say, yeah, and they go, oh, we listen to the show. I always say, well, what is it you like? That's my question back to them, and it's invariably over the years, it's mostly been what I call the infotainment segments that they like. The music they like, I mean, or else they go away, but the infotainment segment seems to be what sticks for them in some way.
Sure.
So I find that encouraging.
I don't. It's interesting because David Wilson, the musician in Springfield, told me one time he had one of his son's friends was over. He said all his friends called him Mr. Wilson, which he always thought was hilarious. But he saw one and he said, "Tell me, do you ever go to the store and buy a CD and bring it home and play it over a bunch of times, and look at the notes and see who's playing, what the titles are, who wrote the music, who's playing what?" And the kid goes, "No, why would I ever do that?" To me is all, I think maybe in folk music, or at least especially in traditional music, the roots and branches are evident in the music. And I think so it becomes something a little more natural to be interested. I just heard, I'd never heard this before, but I heard a record on the radio on KONM, Little Walter singing "Polly Put the Kettle On," which I know from the string band the Skillet Lickers, and I had no idea that. I mean, it wasn't the same thing, but we all take tea. That was in there, and it just kind of blew my mind a little to see. Wow, how did that?
See, but I think it's important. You say you went in, and I think maybe it's generational. Maybe it's because we had albums and the print was bigger. And our eyes were better, but beyond just seeing, well, who's playing that? What's that? You also looked at who wrote it, who wrote the song. Well, okay, why you start seeing these names of people, and you go, oh, well, maybe I better find out about that person. and you could. I mean, I didn't do it from a reading standpoint, but I can remember going out to the Gladstone on, I guess his night was Wednesdays, and Lee would be out there sitting by the fire, playing songs, and I'd say, Lee, that's a great song. Who wrote that? He'd say, Towns. And then, a little bit later on, and he'd be doing it and I go, well, that's another really good. I like that one a lot too, Lee. Who wrote that? He go, Towns. And so I had no idea who Towns Van Zandt was until
Right.
I learned to hear songs from Lee Ruth first. So I think that aspect of that's the tradition in folk of trading and learning other people's music for sure, and then embellishing it and making it however you play it. But the curiosity to look at who's actually playing it, who wrote it, and to disseminate then you're ready for radio, I think.
Well, and I think, for me personally, there was a woman that was hired at the University of Missouri in the English department to teach folklore. Her name was Ellen Farr, and then she was married became Ellen Gibb. She didn't stay there that long, but that was the first time University of Missouri had a folklore teacher in decades. And so I took her classes, and that kind of opened my mind to what the folk process actually is or can be, or what you can discover about it. And so I think that heightened my interest. Cathy was certainly interested in that. At Stevens College, she actually was able to teach a class while she was there. Her professors allowed her to teach a class in folk music. And so the idea of collecting, and Cathy had already been down to the Ozark Folk Center right out of the summer of '73. She went down there. And so that we had that connection and that sense of where music came from. So the idea of little Walter playing a version of Polly Put the Kettle On, which is really, just wild. And so that's why I chose that version of Shenandoah, to open my show, because it was a variant. And you could, what is that? Isn't that Shenandoah? Not the wide Missouri, it's the world of misery. Ha. It's just fun. The more you know, the more you can make fun.
Well, there's that.
I also remembered there was a time, there were bands. Sam Griffin was banned from playing Gordon Bach songs for a while because he played it all the time. And then there was that ban on Jim Ringer and Mary McCaslin. It seems like everybody went up there on the station and started playing their albums. Okay, that's it. Stop. You have
to try to save the vinyl from being overly worn.
Yeah, so I didn't really have that problem, but it was fun.
I've always kind of been hanging with engineers most of my time. I guess one of my main mentors was a guy named Bob Pruitt, who had the first studio in town that I ever went to, and hung out and learned a lot from Bob. And of course, his brothers still are in the Bel Airs, and I think Bob is in San Diego. Last I checked on him, and it was interesting. One time, this was a Boone County Live, and for those of you who don't know Bob, he's a great slide player as well, and he was coming up to do a show. It was a wintertime thing, and he lived kind of out, kind of almost out Paris Road, just about the highway in Paris Road, and he always was a biker. He rode bicycles, and and he had a long bicycle hat. You like this one, and then he had a wool hat. Well, he gets there, and he's drinking cough syrup with codeine in it because he's sick. So I set him up over in front of the blues section at the station, which was right outside of the window, basically the production room, and pulled out just a
Oh,
few albums for him to see, and interesting evening of recording Bob doing blues things
hmm.
on it while he was, I was thinking, man, he reminded me of like how all of the old, you hear stories about how all of the black blues players were barely hanging in there with tuberculosis or whatever, and we're still playing,
Yeah, right.
It was a little a channeling of that. It was quite nice actually. So
Yeah.
on it. But from the engineering side, and then once that I started hanging out up there doing those kinds of things. Um, that's where Sam and I guess, got together mostly because, Sam's the fix it, make it engineer as far as
Yeah,
I go.
I mean, I have to say, my connection, I always felt a connection through to KOPN just with my friendship to Sam Griffin because, he was always, he was there, Sparky, getting zapped in a in a tower room somewhere, and he was always up there, and Sam was a in as Frank Fillo told me, he said, man, in the field, Sam is amazing, he's a creative problem solver, and out there reaching for whatever he can to make it go. Getting him to the field, that's a different problem there. But I mean, he was, um, I always felt like he practically camped out at the station for a lot of time, and so I always, if we were going to do something with Sam, it was like, oh well, I'll be out of the station at such and such time.
Yeah,
That
right.
he was there, and it was so I always felt connected that way. And then of course he was in the bingo thing, and doing all these bingo things, and so yeah, I heard all of this.
Oh, bingo. Yeah, I remember bingo. Bingo was an interesting little time. I mean, it was kind of one of those things where we did walk on the kind of the darker side just for money for a while because we needed to on
Yeah.
it. And Sam loved to call the bingo numbers, and they loved Sam as a bingo caller. It was quite interesting. All I wanted to do was sell specials and pay people money, uh, and on
Did
it.
he know? I should have. I should ask him. I haven't talked to him in a while. I have heard other people call bingo, and they have these extra phrases for certain things. They're little cute, little clever. I can't think of one. B9. Oh, how sweet we are. Or something. I don't know that kind of
Uh,
stuff. I
yeah,
don't know
no,
if you.
the bingo players, at least who were around here, wanted nothing but the numbers,
Yeah.
nothing but, and
Yeah.
and call them twice. That was
Yeah.
it.
I think Sam went with some woman on a bingo bus junket one time. He said it was
Uh,
like they were going to bingo parlors in Kansas or Oklahoma or something, and
it's yeah, for sure.
The KOPN bingo went away sometime about 1991 or two or somewhere in there. And I was living with Jonathan Yates. I don't know if you guys ever knew Jonathan.
Yeah,
And,
no, nothing.
and Jonathan was a bingo devotee. He would go and work the bingo, and he talked me into it. And I said, well, I love KOPN. I'll go up and volunteer selling cards. And I didn't realize what a smoke-filled
Oh God.
that was. And I would come home like the 2 or 3 times I did it and just like hang my clothes like way over here, like put them outside for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan would tease me because I felt like I was giving myself cancer just from secondhand smoke there. And he's like, well, Jonathan, he's like, well, don't you love KOPN? Won't you do anything?
yeah, come on, man.
Well, some of our friends who, Paul and at that time when he was married, with Win, and Paul would come work the games, and Win would make Paul take his clothes off outside because they couldn't come in the house because they smelled like a ashtray.
Yeah, that's right.
It's pretty much so.
I didn't know
Yeah.
Paul worked bingo. He had a show. Woody's
Yeah.
Children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he worked. I worked with Paul a few times at the bingo hall. Oh my, there you go.
Yeah.
It was such an interesting hybrid because I felt like the other KOPN volunteers that were there were kind of this set of people who were nothing like the people playing bingo. You know,
No.
like these hippie types who were just trying to raise money for their station. They're with these like chain smoking gamblers, like chugging Cokes. And it was just a really weird culture, not clash, but just, I was not game to go to the bingo fundraiser, even though I knew at that time, this is KOPN's main moneymaker.
Yeah.
I was not hip on going repeatedly. So all respect to those of you who did.
Well, you could, it was one of those things where you didn't want to go a lot, but it brought us through a period of time where we probably would not have survived. I think maybe
Yeah.
I don't know
I got that impression. Yeah.
on it.
That's, yeah.
What do you think about the new big KOPN upcoming new facility, Mr. Para?
Well, I have not been in there. I'm on the advisory committee that was, got that started to raise money and stuff. And I'm not sure how much of a help I was, because I don't, the people I know, everybody knows the people I know from KOPN, and I don't have a whole lot of Columbia contacts to hit up for money, but it was interesting. It's been interesting to sit in those meetings and see it come together. Frankly, I thought, oh my God, how is this going to happen? And because you listen and compare the kinds of fund drive totals at KOPN and compare them to say KBIA, and you think, well, I don't know how they're going to do this, but. And I'm really happy. I think it's great. It's a way to keep the radio station surviving and just developing. Who knows?
Well, the accessibility, I think, is a huge factor for everyone.
Yeah.
As we get older, you try to go upstairs for sure, or downstairs.
Yeah, with a hammer dulcimer, of course.
With a hammer dulcimer on your side or back, or a banjo or a guitar, or how about let's haul that Fender amp up those stairs.
Yeah, and the back stairs are even worse, in a way. So
yeah. So I think from that point of, I think it's good, and just the fact that it's more centrally located and not in the what I would call the expensive district of Columbia now.
Well, and financially, to own your own building, it's like anybody else. So I think it's great, and they've come along really well. Since the last meeting we had about what the pledges are up to, it's definitely, it's really they're in great shape, and they need to get to that. They're going to get to that last 10% that's going to be, it's going to be hard. It is going to be like, oh, look, with I remember sitting through, who did this? Was it you? No, it was not you. No, it was Bill Rogers. I remember we were doing a pledge drive. And I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was Bill Rogers who came in and said, I think Joe and I were doing a pledge drive, trying to figure out what to say, the same thing the 12th time. And Bill came and said, no, nobody's calling up. And he pulled the microphone and he got angry and browbeat people. Said, hey, totally, all this, it's really this whole negative shame on you for not sending your money in and stuff. No, that was a tactic. I never used it, but I think somebody called afterwards. I think somebody called and said, you shouldn't have done that.
So, Dave and I have been on these development committee calls together, and you would probably agree with me that the reason we are near $650,000 can be summed up in two words: Diana Moxon.
No, for God's
has
sake,
been just working her just endlessly. and her approach, I've been in several meetings where she gives her spiel, and it's just so concise and impressive, and people just, their money, they want their money just flows out of their pockets and their purses, because she makes it so you can't say no.
Well, that's an art and a skill.
Yeah, and she frames it as an investment in the future.
Yeah.
And then she's got this British accent, so you think, well, we must have brought her in from outside to talk to us about this. But she's,
I mean, my real experience, my only experience with her is on these Zoom meetings, and I'm really impressed on how how efficient she is at getting through. That meeting goes an hour, and it's okay. We're going to say what we have to say and get it done. So, yeah, she's a very impressive person.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad that someone's taken it to this level, that we're looking at the building and into it sometime in the summer.
Yeah.
That's it's more than exciting. I think and there's, I hope that everything is they think about some things and get it all squared away for people to be able to come do radio or podcasting and then radio. It's the thing you mentioned slightly earlier. There's so much competition for people's ears and eyes now everywhere. And that's something that we've grown through that, but and you have to say, well, what's the thing that keeps it there? What's the thing that makes that kernel of KOPN still say relevant, despite all these other avenues for people to input music or whatever it is? And I think there's two things. And you summed it up earlier, Dave, when you said people doing shows, musical shows, or other shows about things they love, things that, and have a desire to share that with an audience. If you have that, then people who want to hear or understand it will find it, I think.
Yeah. I also think, though, that being present when it's happening, listening to you live, I think live radio, live anything. I mean, and that's kind of where my life was. I like to, we like to play for an audience. Cathy loved being in the studio. She actually told me she preferred studio work to being live, and she was a really excellent person to have in the studio. She didn't know much about theory, but okay, ready to play? Yes. Are you done? Yes. Is it good? Yes. It's just the way she played. But being live, there's that magic. It's its own thing. And being able to watch something later is handy. That's true. But being live is, I don't know, there's a certain excitement, vitality to it.
I have a question I would like to throw out to both of you, because you both have many years of experience with this station, is and this is on the list, how has the station changed, either physically or culturally, since you first walked up here in 19 whatever? And to Steve, it's kind of a present tense thing. To Dave, maybe as a listener from afar, maybe that's the question. Is how does it sound different? How's it feel different?
Well, you want me to go first, Dave?
No,
I mean, when I first came up, KOPN, the air board was the KDNA air board, and it was a huge TV board. It had these giant levers that that you could split apart. It looked like you were a Captain Nemo on a ship, and you'd push these levers forward and pull them back, and it really did. It felt like you were in Captain Nemo's world with those giant levers on that TV board. And of course, eventually we had cart machines in there to play things, and then reel machines, and having exposure to real machines. And then that all kind of, there's been technological change that went from half tracks to DAT machines to digital things to The change from vinyl to CDs to people who play off of their thumb drives. That's a huge change, but that's just the way the music is stored and recovered for playback. Um, and it we if people hadn't filed something, you could go spend a long time trying to find it in that library a long time ago, and that's before it's probably and third again is big. So from a technological side of it, even though the airboards are newer and they're still CD machines, we lost having half track machines maybe 10 years ago in the air room, and a lot of those recordings have gone into some process of getting them digitized. So I think from me on air, it's been a technological change from queuing records, and hopefully not on the air queuing them, to
Sorry,
CDs,
Kathy.
to digital files, and I don't know, I'm kind of stuck in that CD realm because I still buy CDs. I still open them up. I still read the track names and who wrote that and who's playing on that. Oh, look, Dave Wilson's on that. My goodness, I know him. Um, which I was really surprised because I didn't know he was on that Les and Gary Gallagher disc called "On the Wing" at first. I didn't realize that Dave was on that at first.
Oh yeah, well, he's
And I
played
opened up,
with
and, oh well, look, there's Dave. Oh, there's he is again. It's the kind of thing, and I find that to be part of what draws me into listening to music and finding it. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little old and stale, and there's so much that comes at us musically now. In the earliest days of music, that was sort of there used to be the studio gatekeepers like at Atlantic, or Capitol Records
uh-huh.
or Motown, who really what they decided you got to hear, what got pressed on the vinyl and got pushed out into the airwaves, and then it started exploding, and now the explosion is so great, huge that there's everybody can record. Who wants to record can record at home for the most part, and so it's hard to have enough time to listen to everything that comes at you.
Oh, it's not
That's my
possible.
biggest complaint, I think, right now, and that's purely a function of over time. It's not a KOPN thing. It's really the medium of making music has gotten so easy to do, not easy as a process, but easy to do technologically, that there's so much of it that it's just almost overwhelming. When you hear somebody, you go, "Oh wow, that sounded different." It's almost like you have to have something a little different to make your ear. I think about that. Oh, gosh, I can't think of his name now. The guy who's a blues player from out in Colorado that came, Otis Taylor. The first time I heard Otis
Oh,
Taylor at Big Muddy, it's like, wow, that's it reminds me of some really ancient old Charlie Patton stuff, but it's not. It's something different, you know. And so that part about it, I think, for my ear, it has to trigger something that says, I want to listen to it more. I got to find out why that is, and then I start looking
mhm.
at it. Um, so
Yeah. I
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
as a listener, I would say overall the production has tightened up in programming that I've heard. People know what they're doing. They have a sense of a quicker sense of timing between their songs that they play. Maybe the production value, I guess, is just a little slicker. Um, and I guess what I hear, I don't know, who was it? It was a couple of years ago, I guess. I was in Missouri. I was home listening, and it was a snowy day, and David Owens came and was doing a show for somebody. I think it was the Sunday Morning Coffee House, And I just heard, I heard a bunch of folk legacy records. One mic panned all the way to the right, one mic panned all the way to the left, natural stereo, very present sound. And so I heard those and I went, wow, I could really, it was a very refreshing sense um, to hear that again. And because the studios, people can really dink with what their reverb is going to sound like. And, very few people go for the real natural thing. Also, I guess over the years, I always, when I listen to KOPN, I'm kind of waiting to hear the sound of the air room. And I think maybe that air room's gotten quieter because you used to be able to hear some, outrageous traffic sounds if they were loud enough, and you could get a sense of the air in that room. And I always liked that. I don't know if maybe it's just a little too, maybe it's a little better insulated there now.
Better windows, I think, is the deal there.
That's probably
It's
Actually, from a programmer standpoint, the thing that this is the newest thing. I guess it's so new I hardly forgot it, but I like it a lot. Is they got this program? I think it's called Spinitron, and when I'm playing music, it 95% of the time it recognizes who it is, what the song is, and what it came from, and puts it into this file list of stuff. So, for years it'd be like, okay, I got to queue this up. Now I got to enter all this stuff, and then I got to queue the next thing, and it was almost like you were torn between the keyboard and the CD player on it. And so now it seems to do that. And
that's nice.
if it doesn't do that, you're kind of like, well, why don't you know that one? You're here. Well, let me tell you what it was.
I was really bad at keeping my radio logs when I did that. I wasn't very good. The other thing that catches me is that the little promo carts, the little clever little dealies come in there. I like those. I always enjoy those. People know how to do that better. But Trevor, you were going to say something.
I think part of why you don't hear the air room is that in the COVID era, as you may or may not know, KOPN's various engineering staff figured out how to automate everything. So any programmer throughout the week can produce the show at home and upload it.
Yeah.
So it's very few programmers that come here to do their show now. And so you get this, you hear it as a listener, you get this really wide,
show.
You get a wide range of sound, because you have some people in their basement talking like 6 feet away from a computer mic, and then you have some people that are like right on the mic. So you have probably 90% of programmers don't come here.
Yeah.
What that results in is it feels like kind of a hollowed out community space in a way, or it's just like when I see people here, it's like after the apocalypse. Oh, you're still alive. You're here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that evolve, or how it comes back. There's a lot of things that are coming back. At the Big Muddy this year, we're going to have a dance. Well, the Mid-Missouri dance community is now starting to dance in person again. I asked the Shape Note singers, Shape Note, let's all sit in an open square facing each other and sing as loud as we can at each other. That went down really quick. And they're gonna, that's starting to come back. But in the same point, the Shape Noters, they sing at the Trinity Presbyterian Church there on West Rollins. They have a space. But the dance community, they had to look around. The dance community, what people do we have left to help us? What people do we have left to dance? There's been a huge interruption, and we'll see how it comes back together. Yeah, the guy at KUNM here in Albuquerque said, "Can you produce from home?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know if I can produce from home. I have no idea. I have no idea how to do that." But being at a station that was the thing about KOPN, even on maybe not so much on a Sunday afternoon, when you could very well be the only one there for hours. But it was always interesting to see who might come in, just as our own Kevin Walsh Zoom bombed himself into our show there, but into our interview. But yeah, that was always great. It felt like a community place.
And it's odd. I'm kind of the other way about it. I really like to go there and do the show when I'm doing it live. Part of it is I'm lazy, and to actually produce a show ahead of that takes, a 3-hour show takes more like 10 hours to get it all together. And when I have to uplink stuff from my Deer Trail internet, it's slow and painful. So there's that. But then this is a point that my friend Clinton and I talked a little bit about. I happened to be on vacation in Florida when this happened. But if I had made a show and had it there ready to go, and on a Friday, Nancy Griffith dies, right? And my
Right.
show's already in the can, ready to go. And there's no Nancy Griffith in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's not good. So that ability to respond in time with when things are going on is important, I think. And that's part of the beauty of the radio. And that's part of what infotainment is about, is because do you know who Peter Bergman is? By either of you? How about the Firesign Theater?
He was.
Oh yeah, sure.
Peter Bergman came to a Midwest Radio Theater workshop in Columbia. Like, this would have probably been, maybe 79, maybe somewhere in there. And he was talking about doing radio and how he was doing radio in LA at that time. And he had a daily show and how bad he had got. He was dreading to go do the show. And it's like, well, why are you dreading it? Because to do this, he was dreading to do the show because he didn't have anything to talk about. Until he figured out that as he was driving into the show, he saw X, Y, and Z happening along in LA. But if you drive a mile, you could take 2 hours and you could see a lot of stuff going on. Well, he started talking about that stuff that was happening. And he said it was endless. There's always something going on out there, and people see it. And if I talk about it, they're seeing it too. And so we're bonded that way. That little kernel stuck in my brain. And so all the infotainment stuff comes out of him telling me that way back in like 79 at an MR2W event.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people, just the most basic stuff resonates with people. You don't have to have some complex thing to talk about or some, world peace level topic. It's just talking about the trees or the critters or the weather or the construction on the road. It doesn't have to be something of world-shattering significance. And when I come in Monday mornings, Dave, there's this Monday morning segment that our most recently departed general manager created called the Wake Up Call. It's 10 minutes before Democracy Now! And it's just an interview, a read of local news. So different people do it each weekday, and I do it Monday. And I won't say that I intentionally F up sometimes, but I feel like it tells listeners like, yeah, there's a human up there, because it doesn't sound slick, and occasionally stumble over my words, not on purpose, but I do kind of, a little bit of me smiles when it's like I fumble over my words, because it tells the listener like, there's a person up there.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I remember one evening Dave Taylor, myself, and Sam were going to mount a box up on Paquin Tower.
Okay.
Because we had used the inside of it for many years for our transmitter, for the STL link. And so we were getting kicked out of the elevator shaft area and had to mount this box outside. And so, there's nothing like starting at like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night with big drills, drilling holes through concrete walls to hang a metal box out. And it took us all night, of course, to get this done. And I remember in the morning, walking over to the edge of the top of Paquin Tower and going, holy, there's not even a rail up here. And looking out over like Columbia as the sun's coming up, and it's like, well, okay, I'm glad we didn't walk around up here anywhere, because but yeah, it was it was a little box that held the STL. It was a cool little box, had its own little air conditioning unit in it. I think that's
Yeah, it's a kind of thing where, a lot of things people try to get something done and they will call and get an estimate and get somebody to come, and yet no, at KOPN it's like, oh, this needs to get done. Let's see, let's figure out how we're going to do this. That to me, there's a beauty to that. So, and obviously Sam, put a lot of his heart and soul and owns the station in his own way. He has ownership. I mean, I know he went times where he, I don't know about paying Sam for things, but but anyway, he spent a lot of time there, and I think has some ownership.
yeah. You got any other questions you got for us? How are we doing time wise? It's 5 almost. You got a half hour or so. You got budgeted. What else you want to know?
I feel like you all have had this really great kind of meandering conversation that has transcended the questions that
Certainly
we put
did.
on the list.
Okay.
So
Did we miss things that were on the list?
I don't think so. I think, my question I always like to end the interview with, and I'll throw it to Dave first, is there anything that you want to talk about we haven't discussed? You sat down today and you're like, I'm going to tell him this.
No, I think I told you the stories that mean the most to me, and I just think KOPN will continue to grow and change and develop as it will in the community, but in some ways there's an essence to it that's still there, and I don't know exactly what that is. It's that sense of, this is the community station, and I'm here to do this for this station, and maybe that sense is still there. I don't know. There was a time when KOPN tried to do some NPR programming, and they didn't, they couldn't afford it after a while, but there was that attempt. I don't know. I also, let's see, there was a guy that did, or there was that show, The Morning Air. The Morning Air, it was classical music. It was before you could hear classical music on KBIA. You could hear earlier classical music on KOPN, The Morning Air. And there was one time where that show was getting canned. And I listened to the programmer play. He got the end of the tune that he was playing, and he goes, and that was Mozart's whatever, something you will never hear played here again. And he jerked the tone arm off the record, to let you know that this is final. And it was pretty painful, really, in a way, but you had to kind of let him go through that. But I don't know. I don't know why. That's one thing I guess I was going to remember. But in terms of there's something, I don't know, there's something continuous in the dynamic change that happens with that station. I'm glad for all of it.
That's well said. As you were saying that, talking about the essence of KOPN, I think it's ground in the carpet over here. The essence can be seen in a stain right here.
Yeah, that's right. Despite all the vacuum cleaners in the world.
Well, I think I've always looked at it as sort of a magnet for creative people. In a lot of ways, I've met a lot of the most creative people I ever know from being around KOPN, whether they be musicians or others. And it's just an odd experience I had. At this point in time, I was actually working for KOPN as a production engineer, and one of the people over at the University of Missouri, who was a professor there, Victor Estevez, he did a show on KOPN, and God bless Victor, and he would come in and he taught mythology over there at the University of Missouri, and Victor was a flaming, flamboyant, gay professor at the university, and and an incredible. I used to love to see him at KOPN meetings, and people would have these, they'd have these trying to reach a consensus, in a room of a bunch of people, and people would have these and Victor would take people's arguments and just like give them to them back in a way that they were like be baffled that what they were saying made no sense. And he was so kind at doing it; it was just crazy. But he would come in. He came in every, almost every week there. And at that time, he was still having early health issues. But we recorded this thing called classical trivia, and he would come in with like 5 or 6 of these scripts that were all stories. And it was a lot for me being just the audio engineer. My job was to record Victor, cut the tape, put the head on it and the tail on it, and stack it on the reel so it could get played, and eventually even on some DATs. And but it was like, oh my God, it was like sitting and listening to Homer tell you stories about mythology or Cincinnatus. You're like, well, who's Cincinnatus? I don't know who the hell Cincinnatus is. Tell me the story of the Roman Lupercalia. All this kind of stuff. That it was just, it's like if you went to the University of Missouri and you were a student, you had to pay for that stuff. I was getting it direct from the guy as he wrote it, and so I gave those tapes and actually all the scripts that we won some like NMCB awards for it, but it was really just amazing stuff. When I was recording them, it was something that when you went up to the station, you would never think that you're going to sit in this production room and listen to the University of Missouri professor of mythology tell you about Greek and Roman gods and all the festivals and everything else. So it was totally unexpected, and I cherish it as part of my time at KOPN. Really, really do. So, I don't know. It's always been a magnet for creative people who want to do things and want people to hear it.
Yeah, and it's almost like you wanted to, if the other creative people you run into, you want to go, oh, you should go down to KOPN. You could, someone should interview you down there, and it could possibly very well happen. Yeah, I think you're right. That's a very good point.
Yeah, Steve's talking about it being a magnet for creatives, and it made me think about like think about walking up to KOPN versus like walking in the bank or like the dentist office. It's like it's just a different vibe.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to be richer every time I come in here, just for the people I meet and the music that's here and the experience, and it's not a radio station. It's not at all, so if people want to compare it to some other media source, it's just not the same function.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you could walk in that door up there at the top of the stairs and go look for someone that you might talk to. It's not like someone's going to stop you from going somewhere, or at least it wasn't at the time, and you could, see whatever is going on there.
Well, I thank Bill Wax for putting me on the air at KOPN as a programmer, and I still correspond with him, and he's gone on a huge world of things. Even though most people didn't really realize, but he taught at the university as well. The rock, they called him Doc Rock because he taught that class over there, rock and blues. And these students would sign up to take just taking this rock and roll and blues class at the university, and didn't realize what they were getting into because Mr. Wax took that stuff serious.
And you'll be pleased to know that Bill Wax committed to an interview, and for today or tomorrow, and I went back to him and I asked, are you ever going to be back in Columbia? Because we'd rather do it in person if possible. So Bill's going to be back in the town on the 4th of July. So we're going to do an in-person here at the station then.
Yeah, there you go. And he'll probably be out at Martin Nola's house, be my guess. That's where he stays when he comes. But Yeah, no, you know, I came up there and like I said, the first show I was actually doing was the live music show, and then I ended up doing the reggae show, and then Rootin' Tootin' Radio, which I've been there a long time, I guess. Seems like.
You've been there so long, you managed to have now a whole stable of co-producers.
Well, believe me, there's certain days on Sundays when I like to be able to stay home and work in the garden. Uh, or if it's snowed, then I always tell them this. I say, if there's snow in the forecast or even a hint of it, the pony and I have this rule. If there's snow, we don't go. Snow and ice, we don't go. We're just the opposite of the post office. And because on it. So
And that's a reasonable thing because you're a volunteer.
Yeah, and we live way out, and I don't drive. I have to put somebody else at risk anymore. So.
And we were talking earlier about the automation and how it's kind of stolen some of the soul of the whole thing. Well, the beauty of automation is that people like Steve can put an evergreen show in there and not have to come out in the snow.
Yeah, I might have to work on that. I think back on these shows I used to do, and there's a couple shows. I did one show that I probably have recorded on cassette somewhere, which was a conversation, and it was a conversation between Patsy Cline and Hank Williams. And so every song that Hank had, Patsy had an answer for, and vice versa. And I did the whole show, those two artists, in a dialogue mode, basically, between Hank Williams and the other show. I don't think I've ever did it. I thought about doing it sometime. It would be Roseanne Cash and Rodney Crowell. Like they were like the Sid and Nancy of Nashville, I think. I mean, those two. I mean, could you imagine a power couple as that in Nashville and how hard it must have been just to have it? And he listened to some of the earlier recordings of hers when he was producing her and his, and you go, oh, man, it must have been some sparks flying around there because it's all captured in their music, and there it is. Be a great film. You wouldn't have to even really make a soundtrack for it. You just pull their music out. Maybe I'll do that someday. Maybe I'll put the show together on it.
All right.
Right.
Dave, good to see you.
Steve, always good to see you. Maybe we'll see you around the Big Muddy.